Hello, my name is Jack Harvison, and I have Spencer Kagan and his theory on cooperative learning from my modern theorist. To start with a little bit about Spencer Kagan, he was born March 8th, 1944. This makes him 78. He was born in California, where he also attended California Berkeley at 17. Post undergrad, he also attended UCLA, remaining in California. He's worked his whole life in the field of psychology and educational development, and to this day, he continues to keynote speak on his findings in the education field. Not much else about his social life is out there. He's not too prevalent on social media or anything, but he does continue to work. Kagan's main theory is cooperative learning. He's been around a long time in the field, but easily this is his most research topic. It involves the theory of communication and engagement to create a more involved and self-sufficient classroom. Emphasis on self-sufficient, I think that really encompasses what cooperative learning is about. In this theory, and unlike some classrooms, the students are not pitted against each other. Instead, they're responsible for sharing ideas and ideologies that may inspire and educate fellow classmates. And this allows students to learn from one another as well as build up their social skills that will carry over to real life scenarios. What cooperative learning is about, the acronym PIES is a great way to remember. The P stands for positive interdependence. This is a win-win scenario for students. When one student succeeds or has success, then other students are also having success based on their peers winning. This combats students being disappointed or dissatisfied when a student other than themselves get a concept or question right. Instead, it's seen as lifting each other up. The I stands for individual accountability. This theory focuses a lot on group or work involvement. Therefore, individual accountability relates to having a way to measure each student's involvement and their contributions. This keeps everyone on task and accountable. The E stands for equal participation. This relates to students having the same opportunities within their groups as their peers. If this isn't possible due to certain roles that were assigned, like being a leader, the writer, or the presenter, then a rotating cycle is implemented to make sure all students will be given the same chance to explore their strengths and weaknesses. And the S in PIES stands for simultaneous interaction. This relates to students being involved equally. An example may be instead of one student talking and 30 others listening, that those other students are required more, such as note-taking, or coming up with questions for the speaker or counter-arguments, or just strengthening their opinion on it. The historical precedent of cooperative learning, it's been around in one sense or another since the early 1900s, and the first articles I read was talking about the use of it in factories and businesses, just the concept of it to become more efficient. But a study done in 1980 by Johns Hopkins University, it took the idea of cooperativeness and attempted to fill a classroom with this. In this, 28 projects were administered within classrooms spanning from elementary to high school in a span of 2 weeks. And a very long article was written on it and the findings. This would be 7 years prior to Spencer Kagan completing his doctorate at UCLA, and 12 years prior to his first book on cooperative learning. I believe that it served as a good precedent for Kagan and what would be to come. The implications of the theory in the 21st century. The first example is Kagan oversaw an experiment with the aid of colleagues that focuses on the improvement of students academically based on the introduction of cooperative learning into their classroom and comparing it to prior cooperative learning. And according to Jeannie M. Dotson, who administered the experiment, for each assessment, the assumption that using cooperative learning structures would result in higher achievement was proven. The results were consistent with those of earlier studies comparing other cooperative learning methods against lecture-independent styles of instruction. And the figure on the right here, it's simplified quite a bit. In the article, they went into depth with the math, but I figured that wasn't necessarily relevant. But overall, class averages did rise academically. And in this study, too, they tested various groups of children, gifted students, students with learning disabilities, and everyone saw improvement that they had tested. The second example is there was a similar experiment that took place in Vietnam. In this study, two groups, each of 55 students, were taught the same knowledge and concepts and then tested on them in the end. Each group was comprised of 50 females and 5 males to keep consistency throughout, and they were learning Vietnamese language. In this article, Van Dat Tran states, the results showed that after approximately 8 weeks, students who were instructed using cooperative learning achieved significantly higher scores on the achievement and knowledge retention post-test than did students who were instructed using lecture-based learning. The study supports the effectiveness of cooperative learning in Vietnamese higher education. These two experiments do raise a couple questions that I have with the studies. Overall, one of them being there was only 150 students between the two that were tested. This is a good chunk, but overall that still is not that much in trying to create a spectrum to judge this theory on. And my second complaint or issue would be the interviewing of the students afterwards. In these studies, they never really asked about or talked about the social skills and development within that. It would have been nice to see the students' firsthand experience compared to lecture-based learning and their newly implemented cooperative learning, as that's seen as a big part of cooperative learning. Implications for my future classroom. Ultimately, I would love to achieve the same results as those who have used cooperative learning in my future classroom. Quite obvious as the academic side increased in both the studies we talked about. And I believe not only academically success is heightened, but potentially more so the social skills for the students. Cooperative learning encompasses teamwork and listening skills to lift one another up. When one student succeeds, everyone succeeds, and in my opinion, these are outlooks that students should take away, even outside the walls of the classrooms, for their future careers and lives. Criticism of the theory. It doesn't diminish the positives that I believe come from it. However, it does raise the question for me, what age group is this most prevalent for? In all my readings and attempts to understand cooperative learning at its core, majority of the time the students that were in reference were those in elementary school or middle school. Even Kagan's books on the matter are all cartoonishly illustrated, giving the impression that it's maybe catered towards a little younger audience. I plan to teach high school students and wonder if they would respond to these group activities positively or view them as childish. I'm sure at some points they'd respond great, but maybe if a year-long cooperative learning year, they may start to lose interest. I don't know. Regardless, I believe they could benefit from the lessons at hand, but if they aren't really buying in, then I wouldn't want to impose a theory on them that ultimately pushes them away. And these are my references. My photos I just listed down here, and my APA citations are right there. Thank you for listening on Cooperative Learning by Spencer Kagan. Thanks.